Welcome. You must have heard about my guest, and that's why you're clapping. And I'm really grateful and happy that you are. Roben Graziadei is my guest, and she is the author of the book, Instinctology. And I got to tell you, if you haven't purchased this book, you have to do it. Now, some of you are saying, what do you mean, Steve, we have to? I'm recommending it, that's all. And this is different thinking for different times, and it would be small-minded if I expected you to go out and do what I say, because never follow anything or anyone blindly. And what I think you'll find interesting about Roben's book and her work is that she talks about gut instincts. And I'm not going to spoil what she has to say. I think you'll find it fascinating, and I think it'll help you. It'll be a great guide, and it'll go a long way to expand small-minded thinking into modeling what the Creator has in store for us. The Creator has in store for us amazing things, but first we have to overcome. That's our job in life, to overcome what I call that acorn brain, that tendency to have small-minded thinking when we're judging others, when we're limiting ourselves, especially what we can achieve in life. And Roben has achieved some great things and has gone through and found the gift in many challenges. And with that, I'm introducing Roben Graziadei, author of Instinctology. Roben, welcome.
Thank you for having me here, Steve. And hello to everyone out there. Thank you for joining us today.
And, I want to start with tell us about yourself, right? Give us some idea of before we get into how the book came about and all the fascinating advice you give and why in the book. I want to have the audience understand a little bit about who you are, because I know it and I'm not taking that for granted. I think it'll be important to share that.
I have been a leadership and sales coach for over 30 years. So I'm dating myself and enjoyed every minute of it. Every minute of it. It's been great. I've been really grateful and thankful for that. Also thankful for my family and my foster son turned godson now. Just grateful for a lot of different journeys that I've taken in life and that my gut instincts have led me to take. And one of those main journeys is having been a leadership and sales coach for about 30 years, had a small practice, a consulting practice in Silicon Valley with Tom Peters, who wrote the book In Search of Excellence. I was a principal in business with him. Mm-hmm. And then I was a consultant for Franklin Covey, a senior consultant for Franklin Covey. Mm-hmm. And my last corporate job, I oversaw sales of leadership and development for Kaplan Inc. So the only reason that I focus in on my career is because a lot of times people ask the question, how did you come up with Instinctology and where did it come from? Mm-hmm. So in talking about myself, I really want to talk about my clients, whom over the years worked with many Fortune 500 companies, leaders of academic institutions. And over the years, I would ask the question, if there's one thing you'd do differently in running your business, I've also asked this of sales professionals, top salespeople. The answer, Steve, was consistently, gosh, I wish I would have trusted my intuition more. And I heard story upon story upon story of people who regretted the times they didn't trust their intuition and were so grateful for the times that they did. Mm-hmm. So I thought, gosh, what's missing in all of my work in leadership and sales coaching is really helping people learn how to build that muscle. I like to put my arm up and say, build that muscle of intuitive intelligence. Mm-hmm. And that's what birthed the book. Then one day I live in Kansas City right now. I was living in San Francisco at the time. I've lived in Colorado, Denver, and Florida, lots of different places. But right now I'm living in Kansas City.
Mhm.
And I just remember years ago when I was visiting here, walking down the streets of the beautiful Country Club Plaza. If you've ever been here, it's just a beautiful, underrated city. It's America's best kept secret.
It is.
And the word, thank you for agreeing with me. It's a beautiful city and the people are down to earth and nice and wonderful.
Mhm.
But the word Instinctology popped into my spirit.
Mhm.
And I thought, what is that? Because it's a new word. So I trademarked the word.
Mhm.
And in Greek, ology means the study of or practice of something. Psychology is the study and practice of psychology.
Mhm.
Instinctology is a word I created and trademarked, and it is the study and practice of trusting your intuition. So I've incorporated into my leadership and sales coaching acumen, helping leaders and sales professionals and people in all walks of life to tune into, trust, and act on their intuition.
Mhm. I think that's great. And I can think of times where it just came to me and I followed it, and it did have amazing outcomes, far beyond what I could have imagined. So you tell us about gut, and before you get into the whole details of gut, because I think it's fascinating, but when you decided to write the book, what prompted that besides your intuition? Did you know when you trademarked the name that it was going to be a book?
No, I did not. However, when I thought I might turn it into a book or a class that one could take online, but I hadn't started the book yet and I hadn't written the book yet. My mentor, one of my mentors, is Hiram Smith, who is the former founder and CEO of the Franklin Covey Company. He has passed away. We miss him greatly. And when I shared the idea with Hiram, he said, Roben, that is brilliant. Before you do anything, before you write a book, before you build a website, before you even talk about it, get it trademarked so you own it, because it's really brilliant.
Yeah.
So that's why I put the time to trademark.
And he wrote your preface or your introduction, but I know he
wrote the
foreword.
He wrote the foreword.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great foreword that he wrote for you, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, you could tell that who he was from what he wrote.
Yes, he's an amazing man. I'm very grateful that he mentored me.
Yeah. And some of the names you mentioned, like Franklin Covey and Kaplan, those are significant names in the training and coaching industry.
Yes.
So tell us about gut. Tell us about your journey to discovering it. Because Instinctology came first, from what you're telling me. Right? And that was an intuition that popped into your head.
Correct.
Wayne Dyer used to say, from nowhere, now here, pay attention to that. And that's exactly what that sounds like, right? You're walking down the street and from nowhere, now here. So tell us how that evolved and how you came up with gut. And then there's some fascinating stories you have about others and about yourself. So start with how did it develop into a book and all of that?
How it developed into a book is after it was trademarked, I then decided to develop it into a book. And the title of the book, as you know, is Instinctology. The subtitle is A Leadership Method for Turning Gut Instincts into Concrete Actions. And as I was writing, I came up with the acronym for the word gut, G-U-T, as God's utmost truth, which I think is the highest power. And I don't have all the answers inside me. I don't have all the answers in my head, right? And so I thought, gosh, isn't that true? The Creator did make us. She created us with gut instincts, God's utmost truth. We all have it, and ancient wisdom talks about that truth that we have inside of us. We all have that. And so the acronym GUT, Gut Instincts, God's Utmost Truth, was born as I was writing. And that came about when my clients would say to me, my gut's screaming at me to do this or not to do that. And then I started asking my clients when they were struggling with an area of growth or a decision to make on branding or marketing and communications or sales commission strategies, whatever they were struggling with, I would ask them, what does your gut tell you? And then they would stop and they'd pause and they'd say, sometimes they would say, oh, it's telling me this. And other times they would say, I don't know. Let me sit with that. So when we got back together for the next meeting, I'd say, do you have a sense of what your gut's telling you? And I shared with them the acronym God's Utmost Truth. And they thought that was so empowering that they told me they decided to just sit with it and see not only what was data telling them, not only what was the board pressuring them to do, not only what were the C-suite with all the data from their different departments telling a CEO or a board or a department to do, but what was their gut telling them? And the gut became the deciding factor. A CEO who's really well known for trusting his gut is Steve Jobs. In a book that Franklin Covey sells, The 4 Disciplines of Execution, we talk about in there a wildly important goal. And a wildly important goal is that one big goal that your company or your department or your family or your church or your volunteer work or a nonprofit, whoever it is, that year's one wildly important goal to execute on. Well, Steve Jobs knew about that long before the book came out because he would be given 3,000 to 5,000 products a year to evaluate, but he'd choose one to roll out. And he is known for saying that the final decision would not rest solely on all the data that came with the product recommendation. He would also incorporate his intuition, and that would be his deciding factor. So I just started learning that there's a lot of people in the business world that really need support in trusting their gut instinct. Albert Einstein said, intuition is the highest form of intelligence. And Albert Einstein also said when he studied physics out as far as he could study it, he said, there's got to be a God. So I just decided to combine the wisdom of all these other people into that acronym, gut instincts, God's utmost truth.
Yeah, I mean, since I read the book, I reflect on it, and I love the idea to have an acronym to call it, right? Because it reminds me to pay attention, especially when I get quiet and notice what pops in from nowhere, now here. So I have a couple of things that I wanted to cover that, when I read a book that I like, I tab it. And one of the tabs I came to was a quote by you.
Oh, okay.
The sun can't force itself onto the shade. When the shade is ready, it will receive sun. That's fascinating.
Thank you.
Talk a little bit about that. Yeah, a little bit about that.
I have had a lot of personal struggles throughout my life, as we all have. And when I wrote the book, the other answer to your question about writing the book is that I wrote it after I had a near-death experience. And I was in the ICU with pneumonia for 10 days. And then I was on disability for a year in recovery. And during that year is when I wrote the book. And I just remember struggling to stay alive, when I was in the hospital. And I remember the moment where I laid in my hospital bed and I just thought, okay, this is it. I mean, if it's time for me to go, I'm going. And if it's not, I'm not. And I just remember saying, God, your will be done. But I do have my now godson, whom I love dearly, and I really don't want to leave him. And I just remember feeling so much darkness coming over me because of the fact that I was literally on my deathbed. But at the same time, I felt so much light. And so then when I was writing the book, I thought, well, I guess what I'm experiencing right now is a lot of shade. And when the sun's ready, it's just going to shine no matter how much shade is there. And that's where that came from.
Yeah. I love that. I love that quote.
Thank you.
And you asked a number of questions in the book that I think will help a lot of people. And I want to just read a few, and then you can comment. I'll ask you to give me your thoughts on these.
Okay.
Have you ever longed to inspire a shared vision resulting in laser-focused results? Have you ever longed to be more decisive with follow-through and time-sensitive actions?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever longed to, I love this one, enhance your work life and or find a better career or employment fit? I mean, there's a lot of people thinking about that right now.
Yes.
Increase your finances in an economic world of uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever longed to increase your confidence, regain control of your life, manage your losses and disappointments better, etc.? I mean, these questions go on, and it's fascinating how they hit home for, I'll bet you, I know a lot of them hit home for me. I guess that's why I picked them, but for so many of our listeners for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So talk a little bit about how, what prompted you to come up with that page, or whatever you want to share about that, because I think it's fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a great question, Steve. There's a couple of things that prompted me to come up with those questions. And the first thing is they're questions I have faced. Every single one of those questions is a question that I had to answer for myself at some point. Mm-hmm. And I am a woman of faith. And so I do pray. And also I know that I have this inner wisdom inside me. That still small voice on the inside. And so when I was confronted with each of those questions at different times in my life, I just remember not just going outward and praying upward, right, to God, but also going inward and really, really seeking to tune into my intuition. And I want to give my dad credit for that. When I was growing up, my dad used to say to me, Roben, you have impeccable intuition. You've got great intuition. And he had a few business endeavors that he pursued. It was wonderful to have a father that encouraged me with that. He had a number of different business opportunities that he pursued on the side of his full-time career. And he would always bring me into them. And he'd say, I want to bring you into this because you have great intuition. I want to know what your intuition has to say. So, I really have to thank not just my heavenly father, but my earthly father for really empowering me as a young girl to trust my intuition and to care about my opinion. It was validating as a young woman. So the questions came from the hard things I faced in life, the courage to ask myself the questions, espouse Instinctology, and write the book came from just the memory of my dad encouraging that in me.
I'm glad I asked the question. It's a fascinating story. And I think there's another, in the introduction you wrote this that moved me, and I'll tell you a little bit why, but I want to read it first. It's on the bottom of page 5. In order to lead others more effectively, I must first lead myself more effectively from the inside out.
That's right.
Of course, and I love it because on my letterhead is life is best lived from the inside out, and I have a logo that I accompany that thought with, and so talk a little bit about that, because I was moved by that, probably because it told me we were like-minded.
Yes. Well, where that came from is the times where I did not manage myself well from the inside out. And maybe I fell on the side of getting defensive in a moment in life, or I succumbed to the pressures of data, or now artificial intelligence, or likes on my Facebook page, or somebody else's talking points, or the pressure from a coworker or a boss or a family member. And I abdicated responsibility for myself, and I based decisions more on what I thought other people wanted me to do or were pressuring me to do. And in those moments, sometimes I became unhappy, and sometimes I learned a lot and I grew. But other times I became unhappy, and maybe I even got defensive. Maybe I even argued with someone or became difficult in the moment, right? Because I just was, instead of just confidently and calmly honoring my intuition and just responding with an elegant no, or an elegant, I hear what you're saying, and I, just to honor me, need to go this direction, I would get defensive or I'd argue. And I thought, there's really no need for that. All I need to do is really, truly lead and manage myself inwardly, and then externally, I will be a phenomenal leader and influencer.
Yeah. Yes, it's determining that nothing from the outside will ever make us happy, right? It's a question.
Right.
I'll be satisfied when, and there is no when. There is no when. It's just to be satisfied, and that I just love that you had that in there, and it was one of the things that I flagged when I read it, and so.
Just to wrap a bow around this part of our conversation is now when people are argumentative with me, or they try to fight over something, whether it's in business or personal life, because we're living in a world of upset and people are living on edge. And I find that people do tend to be really on edge right now. And so now I'll just say to a person, your arguments with yourself, it's not with me. It's not with the government. It's not with the talking points you see on all mass media. It's with yourself. And when you find true internal calm, there's nothing to fight about.
No.
I just want to wrap that bow around that part of this topic. I hope you're okay with that.
Well, perfect, because it represents different thinking for different times. I mean, people mostly believe they're thinking, and then today our leaders don't model healthy thinking. They don't take accountability for things. It's in the media, it's in our leaders, and they're pointing fingers at each other, saying, well, they're wrong and they're wrong. The problem with all that is when we want to be right, we forget that we're making a whole bunch of, at the cost of making many people wrong, and it's not modeling a good behavior, which is have a dialogue. Let's figure out, I see where you are. How'd you come to that? Would you like to hear where I'm at? How I came with that? And then establish a compromise, or at least a respect for each other. I understand. So, yes, that's why I loved it.
Thank you for saying that. It beautifully illustrates the point.
Yeah, I got it when you read it. I mean, when you wrote it, and I read it, because I only marked those things that moved me, and that did. And then you had stories of historical leaders. Franklin D. Roosevelt, Martin Luther King, Princess Diana, right? Fascinating stories, which all really emphasize your point. And you picked them. You picked them. So a little bit about the background there, and maybe one of the stories of all those that really stuck out to you.
I love the story about Franklin Roosevelt. And how at the it's a perfect example of what we're all facing today, right? I just spoke at a conference last Thursday. The theme of the conference was how to maintain humanity in an artificial intelligence world. And my topic was on by trusting your intuition. If you balance intuitive intelligence with artificial intelligence. It's not an either or, it's a both and.
Yeah.
When you research artificial intelligence these days, you may not even find the core source where the data came from, and garbage in, garbage out. So just because you see something on social media doesn't mean it's accurate. So even when you research it to the nth degree, you still may not know if it's accurate. So then how do you balance that? You balance that with your own intuitive intelligence, which a lot of us do organically. We don't consciously know that we're doing it. So Instinctology is about helping people take what they're doing organically. We call it in the training world, as you know, Steve, going from unconscious competence to conscious competence. From doing something naturally and organically, like Franklin Roosevelt did when his writers were telling him what to say on the radio after Pearl Harbor, and his writers were pressuring him, but he organically and naturally trusted his own intuition. Now, this was before we had the internet, before we didn't have mass communication advantages and disadvantages. So he literally had to decide that without gathering a lot of information.
Yeah.
He decided it based on his own internal intuition. He may not have said it that way, but that's what I think he was doing.
Yeah.
So we now, living in an artificial intelligence age, need to rely more on our intuitive intelligence than we ever have before in history.
Yeah.
Because your intuition, there's nothing artificial about it. Your intuition doesn't have a spin. One's intuition does not ever lead them to harm someone. I always say that in all of my talks. Don't ever use intuition as a justification for harming another, because our intuition is God's utmost truth. It comes from the highest good. It doesn't lead us to harm someone. So the reason I picked Franklin Roosevelt and the other examples you spoke about is each of these people on the fly made decisions that went against what was scripted for them.
Yeah.
Somebody had written a speech for Martin Luther King. When he got up in front of the audience, he wadded that speech up. He didn't throw it away, but he wadded the speech up, put it in his pocket, and out of his mouth came, "I have a dream."
Yeah.
So it's in those moments where we do not succumb to the sea of systemic influences from just bombarding us. It's in those moments where we are just truly, authentically ourselves, going on our own gut instincts, that are the most powerful and bring about, as you said earlier in our conversation, some of the greatest things in our life that are beyond what we could even imagine. I don't think Martin Luther King thought his speech was going to go down in history as one of the greatest speeches of all time. Nor did Franklin Roosevelt think that what he said in his speech and some of the things that Princess Diana did, I don't think these people were thinking, this is going to become the greatest speech or the greatest quote or the greatest this or that. They were just going on and they may not have even consciously known it, but they were just trusting how they were being led from, as you say, Steve, the inside out. That's why I picked those three people. Yeah.
Well, and Martin Luther's, the story about him, he had led a march into Selma, and it was nonviolent, but yet the police reacted with a lot of arrests. And then the next week, he turned the march around because obviously his intuition said, no, we better not.
Yep.
And still he accomplished what he wanted to accomplish for the country and for...
That is an absolutely excellent example. Yes. Yeah. So I just think that now, more than ever, with what we're facing in artificial intelligence and mass pressure from talking points we see across all news channels, doesn't matter which side you're on, all the talking points.
Yep.
We really don't know what the truth is, because it's easy to spin anything. So you've got to be in tune with your own intuitive intelligence.
It's true. I mean, as you say, as you point out, whether it's our leaders or the media, there are media outlets on one side or the other, and what they do is gather people who have that opinion. Now, it's an opinion. There's a lot been said over a lifetime about opinions, but they're not experts, right? There's not experts. They have an opinion, which is fine. But years ago, I remember watching TV where the general manager would come on. The following person's views are not shared by the management of this station.
Right.
They acknowledged that it was an editorial, that it was an opinion of someone, and we've lost that completely. And partly because we're believing we're higher than whatever that intelligence is, right? That we have the hubris as humans to think that we know it all, and gut instinct is absolutely the opposite of so many ideas that humans have, like striking somebody else or attacking another country. Those are not inspired by whatever created the universe. For me, it's God. For others, it can be whatever they call it.
Right.
And that's fine, because infinite intelligence wouldn't have made one way. The creator of an infinite universe wouldn't have said, well, you're all wrong unless you all believe this way. You have another quote. Darkness wants to consume your light. Don't let it. Let your light shine. And then the one that follows it on that page it's in line with it. Darkness cannot consume the light. That's why there are stars in the sky.
Yes.
I love those quotes. Those are Roben's quotes, folks. And then you led into from ashes to beauty. And then you had some stories about how your gut instincts led you for some real estate. But do you want to start from ashes to beauty or the real estate? It's up to you. How your gut instincts led you in those stories.
Let's start with real estate.
Okay.
And this applies to all business. I can give you an example of a great partnership that Franklin Covey and I did with a company, Pima Medical Institute, and that was prompted from a gut instinct. So when I'm working with executive leaders and salespeople, I really encourage them, listen to your instincts, because I honestly, Steve, don't think I am the best salesperson in the world or on the planet. However, people say to me, you're really good in sales. And I think that I'm good in trusting my intuition, because I follow what my intuition says, and that leads me to a great partnership. So I'm not selling something, I'm partnering with somebody on something.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of business examples of that. But in terms of real estate, while I've had a career in consulting and training leaders and salespeople, on the side, I have been a property flipper long before property flipping was a thing. So again, I'm dating myself. When I first started property flipping, it wasn't even it wasn't a thing at all. And every time that I have flipped a property, I've had intuitive hits, an intuitive nudge that told me what to place the property on the market for, the amount to place it on, or the timing or the date or certain ways to market it. And every single time, those intuitive nudges have resulted in what you had said earlier, the property selling for more than I would dare to think, ask for, or imagine, more than you could imagine.
Yeah.
So in my book, I try to tell a story about finances, how to increase your finances, and I use the real estate examples as that. I want to tell a story about relationships, and I use an example of running into my ex-husband on an airplane, which that's an amazing story. And an example of even how it enhances the quality of your artistic life and your personal fulfillment. And I tell the story of running across a painting in San Francisco that was of my girlfriend and I when we were in Santorini. Gosh, how would I that just all of these stories are really...
What were the odds of that?
Yes.
Yeah. What were the odds of that? Yeah, that's a great story.
And to your point, Steve, the odds of all of these stories, people say those are greater odds than winning the lottery. The odds of an intuitive nudge to get on a flight tomorrow morning, and then I run into my husband I hadn't seen for 25 years, my ex-husband.
Yeah.
Or the nudge of walk through this section of town tonight, and I see a painting of me in the window. I mean, these are just these odds are greater than the odds of winning the lottery. And so
I forget who said it, but that synchronicities and coincidences were God's way of staying anonymous.
I love that. Yes, you've said that to me before. It's almost also like the book Blink. You just get an intuitive nudge, and you've got to act on it.
Yeah. Well, and you've done it so many times and so well. So in the closing few minutes, talk about GUT, the acronym, and anything else that you want to add to that. But God's utmost truth.
Mm-hmm. Well, I say our gut instincts are God's utmost truth because of ancient wisdom that comes from the Bible. And there's a verse in the Bible that says the truth is deposited into all of us, that we were made that way. So it's my personal stand in life that I believe that truth that's in us, we all have it. And so if I take the time to just tune into God's utmost truth within me, my gut instincts, it's just led to many miraculous outcomes in my life. So that's where that came from. There's another acronym in the book that I use, and it's called ACT, A-C-T, teaching people how to build that muscle of intuitive intelligence. Remember in 2000, emotional intelligence was rolled out and people didn't know what it was. And here we are 24 years later, and now it's a household name.
Right.
But people had to learn how to practice the muscle of emotional intelligence. Now I invite people to practice the muscle of intuitive intelligence. And over time, I believe that the quality of people's lives and in every area will exponentially grow. The acronym ACT, the letter A, simply means to acknowledge the intuitive nudge. And I also like to say the letter A means anchor in on it. So people say, well, I can't always just sit and be still and be quiet and hear it and write about it. That's what the letter A is for. It's for all you need to do is mentally acknowledge to yourself, I just had this intuitive nudge. And if you can't stop what you're doing right now, use your phone and text it to yourself. That's what I did the day that intuitive nudge said, get on the first flight tomorrow morning from Denver to Kansas City. And I just texted it to myself because I'd just come off stage and I was surrounded by people, but it came to me and I just sent myself a text. Then when I got to the parking garage, I called Southwest Airlines, made the reservation, and saw my husband, who I hadn't seen in 25 years. That's the letter A. The letter C in the word ACT is commit. You've got to value yourself enough to move from acknowledging the nudge to committing it to action. And that takes trust and courage, because most people would think, well, that's crazy that you're just going to, because you had an intuitive nudge, get on the next flight, the first flight tomorrow morning. But I did, and it was a great outcome. And there's all kinds of stories in my book about that, and I can tell you more if you want to hire me as a leadership and sales coach. I've got a million stories I'll share with you to support you. And then the letter T is to trust your intuition and tell others about your success stories. Because when we tell people about our success stories, it builds our confidence. So the acronym ACT is ACT. So act on your gut instincts. And that, I hope that helps explain those acronyms.
I think it gives people a way to build the muscle, right? That's the thing is that intuition, the more one pays attention to it and acts, because if they disregard it, they're not going to build that muscle because they'll get proof from the actual taking action on the nudge. They'll get proof that wow, that was amazing. And then perhaps listen to it more and more and more. But it's like any other muscle. If it's not used, then it just atrophies.
That's right. And if we don't act on it, it can cause us a lot of trouble. I like to focus on the positive. So in my book, I tell mostly positive stories, but I do tell one story that I call it a failing forward story. I did not act my intuition. I was on a first date with a guy I met online, and the hair stood up on the back of my neck over dinner, and it said, "Get up, go, get up, go, get up, go." And you know what, Steve? I didn't get up and go because I didn't want to hurt his feelings.
Yeah.
That guy turned out to be a serial stalker. He stalked me for a full year. And it took a lot for me to safely extricate myself from that situation. So, yes, I talk mostly about the success I've had from trusting my intuition because I like to focus on the positive. I also want to let all of your audience know I'm human. I make mistakes. And even though I wrote the book, the time there's other times too, but this particular time I didn't trust my intuition, and it nearly cost me my life. So it's on both ends of the spectrum. The times we haven't trusted it, and the times we have stories to tell of success, and I call them failing forward stories.
Yeah, no, both are so valuable, and sometimes the opposite, right? When it doesn't work and we don't pay attention is a bigger teacher because it reminds us to pay attention. I love that you share both. So tell us where we can buy this wonderful book, Instinctology.
Thank you for asking.
A leadership method to turn into concrete action, right?
Yes.
Concrete action. So where can we buy this wonderful book?
Thank you for asking, Steve. Instinctology sells on Amazon, so you can buy it there. You can get in touch with me through LinkedIn, just under the name of Roben Graziadei. You can also go to Instinctology.com and find it there. The word
we'll put that in the notes for the podcast, so people will be able to see it. And that's Roben Graziadei. I'm going to spell it for everyone, so get your pens out. Roben, Roben, and Graziadei, Graziadei. And what does Graziadei mean?
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.
It means, in Latin, it means thanks be to God.
There are no coincidences in this world, and probably why we met. Because there were certainly coincidences that are involved in our meeting, right? Things that are outside of writing a book. So it's been wonderful. I thank you.
Thank you for having me, Steve, and hello and goodbye to everyone out there. Please feel free to contact me. I would love to support you in your journey, professional or personal.
Yeah, and feel free to contact me, Steve, at stevelentini.com. That'll be in the podcast notes, Steve at stevelentini.com, and I will forward your inquiry to Roben as well. So contact Roben directly, contact me. Either way, we'll get you to the book, we'll get you to Roben, and consider having her as a speaker because her story is amazing, and we've only scratched the surface. So thank you, Roben, and thank you one and all.